we had to make sure he got his joy back because somehow he lost his joy. We're not going to say where he lost his joy, but somehow he lost his joy.
Why do you keep doing this? Do you even know what these are called? What are they called?
2 fingers.
Welcome back to the Bay Area Beat. We are recording just minutes after the Warriors got blown out in Game 2 to the Timberwolves. Now, Satchel, if you would have told me before the series that after being on short rest with the 7 games against Houston that the Dubs would split in Minnesota, I would have taken that any day. But Steph's hamstring injury has really put a damper on the vibes around this team and what they're capable of doing in the next 2 to 3 games without Steph. But I'll give the floor to you. Where do you want to start, Satchel?
Honestly, and maybe this is a hot take, maybe this isn't, but like watching this game, I don't really think they're like that far out of the series, even without Steph. Like, you know, at one point they cut it to 7 and like they just played sloppy tonight. And, you know, I expected them to lose this game. You know, like not much of my opinions have changed other than that, like, honestly, they hung around for a lot longer than I think they should have. And coming back home, hopefully maybe some of these role guys maybe can knock down some shots. But I think it's really still going to be a bit of a closer series than I think people might expect even without Steph. And unfortunately, honestly, watching this, it's like they could have probably won this in 4 or 5 if Steph was healthy.
Right. I haven't been impressed with Minnesota whatsoever watching them. You know, they hit some threes tonight, which is probably the main difference from games 1 and 2. But they're a team that kind of let the Warriors get back into it in the third quarter when they had no one outside of a little bit of Jimmy Butler, some Jonathan Kuminga attacking the glass, and you know some TJD action. But like outside of that, it was no shows from a lot of the team. And the Warriors were able to cut it to 7 with 6 minutes left in the third quarter, and then Minnesota went on a 13-0 run, and that was the game. But yeah, you know, we've seen the same thing over and over again with this team without Steph, where they're really struggling to get in their offensive sets and have any sort of flow. Like they're kind of stagnant, waiting around the ball, and pretty much every shot feels like it's waiting until like the 21st second on the shot clock to get one up. They had 8 total shot clock violations in 2 games, and I think three tonight, 13 turnovers. So it was a lot of just no shows across the board. And it was also, you know, we saw some weird rotations where Quentin Post gets the start. He plays the first 3 minutes of the game, and then we don't see him the rest of the night. And Steve Kerr plays 13 players in the first 14 minutes of the game. He plays the entire roster in the first half. And I don't know. I don't even know what to make of it. I'm not saying like Steve Kerr was wrong to have to play all those guys, but it's kind of the dire situation of where they're at. And I guess we can start with Steph. What do you think they need to do to stay afloat without Steph? Likely missing 2 minimum, maybe even 3 games.
Everyone says, you know, they should probably just want to try to win 1 game, right? Like obviously don't want to go down 3-1 because that'd be tough. If you get it, you know, 2-2, lose game 5 or 3-2, that's fine. But honestly, with how bad the Timberwolves have looked in these first 2 games, I feel like it's not unreasonable to be like, they could win both of these home games. Like, I'm not saying that they will, but I think they could, you know? And so, and maybe I'm just a bit more of an optimist than some people, but like, I really think if they stay locked in, because I think that was the big thing tonight, where I was like, they locked in at the start of the third quarter, they went on that run, and then they just got really sloppy afterwards. People were all over the place on defense in a bad way, and they were just throwing the ball to the other team. And so I'm like, honestly, if they can stay focused, they can beat this Minnesota team on any day.
I agree with you that they can beat this Minnesota team, but I struggle to see them have the offensive firepower to keep up with them. And, you know, they put themselves in a hole early on in the game. They were down 13-0 to start. I think the Timberwolves hit 3 threes in the first 90 seconds of the game. And it was just kind of an uphill battle from there. Like, is there anyone you see kind of stepping up? We saw that kind of be Kuminga tonight. Like, I personally think Jimmy needs to be more aggressive. We saw that a little bit in the start of the third quarter. He kind of stepped it up, but he had 4 shots in the first half. And without Steph, the offense should completely run through him. And he just hasn't shown the lack of aggression. And maybe he's exhausted. He only played 34 minutes tonight, but he looked pretty beat like towards the end of the game. And, you know, he's only 10 days removed from his pelvic injury, and the Warriors have played every other night for about a week and a half straight. So I don't know. Who do you think really needs to kind of step up? You mentioned the role players. Is there anyone in particular?
I think I agree about the Jimmy thing, but in terms of role players, I mean, maybe it will be Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, he had a great game tonight. And honestly, that was one thing that I thought honestly was a little weird is he seemed like the only Warriors player interested in like trying to put up shots tonight. And he only played 26 minutes. And I wonder, I'm like, if he's going to be one of the better players in this non-Steph stretch, then just keep him out there. Like he's 22 years old. Like he can't be telling me he can't play 30 minutes. Like, I don't know. And the other thing is like not even about a specific role player, but I think just as a team, more people need to shoot the ball. Like I
completely agree.
That's been, I feel like, a problem with this team all season long is they get themselves into like pretty decent looks and then they turn around and throw a pass and it's either a turnover or it's a shot clock violation. And sometimes you just have to take the open shot. It's not always going to go in, but especially if you're within 10 feet of the basket and you have a decent look, you have to shoot that shot.
It seems like specifically Podz is completely like scared to shoot. He was, giving up some terrible turnovers on the offensive end, but like a lot of those turnovers were shots he was deciding to pass up, take an extra dribble. He's in the middle of the air and has to kind of kick it out and ends up turning over the ball, and also just giving up wide open layups on the other end, which it's such a negative. Another guy too is Moses Moody. Like what has happened to that guy? He was awesome the first 5 or 6 games of the Rockets series. He's 0 for 15 from the field since game 6 and has pretty much looked borderline unplayable. I mean, he wasn't even close on a lot of those misses today. He was missing side of the backboard. He was airballing. I think he airballed 2 or 3 threes. Granted, a few of them were at the end of the shot clock, but like Moody looks completely unplayable. And the Warriors were like 18-0 to start the season in games he started. Like, I don't know what's happened to him. Is it because Steve Kerr pulled him halfway through the Rocket series and took him out of the starting rotation? Like that shouldn't affect a guy's confidence the way this has.
I don't know, really. I mean, like, he looked lost out there today. Like, I think you saw it early on that fast break attempt where it's like, maybe he probably should have passed it off to Podz, but then at a certain point you get there and you're like, okay, he's going to try to find a way to either score this or get fouled, and he airballs a floater. He's completely fallen off the map, and I don't know what you do to turn this around. They always say sometimes you just got to shoot your way out of this, but if you're going to keep throwing up airballs, I don't really know what to do.
So Kuminga went 8 for 11, for 18 points. I think he started 8 for 8 from the field, so he might have missed his last couple shots. And he was awesome. I mean, he really was kind of bringing some offensive force on the glass that just hasn't been there the first 2 games of the series. And, it's kind of the Jonathan Kuminga experience. Like he makes an awesome play, scores an easy transition bucket, and then turns over the ball and misses 2 free throws. And I want to more like live in a good world right now with Jonathan Kuminga because he probably had his best game in a month or 2, but it's asking a lot of a guy who has played very sparingly the first 2 weeks of the season and the latter half of the regular season.
No, it definitely is, but I mean, especially the way some of these guys have looked against this Minnesota defense is you just need a guy who can create his own offense, which without Steph, they really just have the one guy in Jimmy. Like Buddy Hield is, still going to get his buckets here and there, but that's coming off of other players, and so it is a lot to ask for a guy who's, I don't know where his head's at. I don't know where his game is at, but they're going to need somebody to step up. And he looked like tonight, like he could. Granted, a lot of those buckets were coming with the team down 15 or 20. And so, like, can we do that when the game's a little closer? And can they keep the game closer? I think that's going to be the biggest thing, especially for game 3, is they need to come out and start better. Because I think against the Rockets, honestly, they put themselves behind the 8 ball a lot and got down early in those games. And they were able to come back in some of them, but especially without Steph, like undermanned, you need to have good starts.
You need to have good starts, or at least decent starts that aren't 13-0, and you're essentially like never looking even close to breaking the lead. It was a pretty frustrating game. It was also, I don't know if you would say the same, it felt pretty predictable coming into a game with an absolute like strength in numbers culture win in game 1 where Steph gets hurt in the second quarter and they just, on the reliance of excellent defense and veteran chemistry and just playing really smart basketball. I don't think they turned over the ball very much in game 1. And they probably were like, we did our job. We got the split that we needed in Minnesota. And I don't know if there's too much more to it, but I don't know, man. I like your confidence in saying that you think they could win both in San Francisco. And if not both, like you think they have a really good shot at winning one of the 2. And yeah, if I had to put money on the line, I'd probably say they do win one of the 2, but like a lot needs to go right. It feels like for them to be in that position.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely true. I just, like watching the game tonight, it seemed like if they were just a little bit more mentally engaged in the second half, they could have won this game, you know? And I think, going home will help with that. I think also not knowing when Steph's going to be back will help with that. And the other thing, too, is the thing about that game one win was they won it with defense, right? And
Completely.
that is how they're going to have to win these games. Because as to your point earlier, the offense might not be there to keep up with Minnesota, but if they can play great defense, which they had even in stretches in this game, they had, a couple of 5-minute spurts where they were forcing turnovers, but the offense just couldn't figure it out. But if they can play a complete defensive game, they don't need to score 100 points to win. They haven't scored 100 points yet in this series, and yet it's 1-1.
It feels like they were doing one of the two things well. When they were playing really good defense, they couldn't score a bucket to save their life. And then when they were finally starting to hit some rhythm and offense, they were giving up wide open threes, missing transitions. It was sloppy. You're right. There were stretches and the offense held them down early on in the first quarter and just put them in a hole that they weren't able to climb out of. But the amount of wide open threes Minnesota took and made, like they hit 15 threes in the game. And I know they only made 2 in game 1, but this was the 4th best 3-point shooting team in the regular season. Like, you have to assume that they're eventually going to go back to the median range and start hitting their threes. And, I'm not going to be too hard on a team that had just won a huge game and is playing without their best player on the road. But it felt to me like a pretty lazy defensive effort. And I don't know if that's like a scheme thing, like trusting that, Jaden McDaniels and Julius Randle are not going to hit 40% of their threes. But like those guys and Dante were like wide open all game long.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing where it's like, honestly, you just get a couple of hands up here and there, and maybe they don't knock down all those threes. There was a lot of just wide open shoot around looks. And I think that's going to have to change going forward. And honestly, even though, I look at his box score and he only had 9 points tonight, it felt like Dante DiVincenzo added a lot of value for Minnesota tonight, just in terms of his like kind of floor game, which honestly, as a Warriors fan, was frustrating to see because he went out pretty sad in that Lakers series in 2023. But the other thing that I'm looking at is they've really minimized the impact that Rudy Gobert is having on this series. I feel like,
Totally.
Like he only played 27 minutes tonight, didn't have a block, and, he was crying to the league about some of the physicality in game 1.
Dude, Rudy Gobert is having Chris Finch do his dirty work, complaining to the league. He's 7'1", and Warriors don't have a guy on the roster or in the starting 5 that's taller than 6'6", 6'7". And like the fact that he can't create, I mean, that's just Rudy Gobert in a nutshell, but I completely agree. They have neutralized him. I don't know his exact stat line today, but it was a lot of missed 2-footers and missed free throws, and like Warriors played him off the floor in game 1, and they did a pretty good job of like containing him in game 2. And yeah, he tends to get played off in the playoffs. We've seen that time and time again, but he was so good in that Lakers series that it was kind of like the Timberwolves going to find ways to play Rudy Gobert and to have him play meaningful minutes. And we'll see how the next 5 games go. Hopefully we'll see, but neutralizing Rudy Gobert, and also I think forcing Anthony Edwards into a lot of jump shots will be really important. He is, a great shooter. I think he led the league in threes this year, but I think the Timberwolves are most dangerous when everyone's getting involved. They're constantly swinging. They have a lot of talent in that starting 5. And when Anthony Edwards has 6 or more assists, I think the Timberwolves are like have an 85% win percentage. So just forcing him into tough shots and moving him away from being the primary ball handler and offensive creator, I think will pay dividends.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the biggest thing that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to try to keep him out of the paint. Like I think the first game, but also today, they were letting him get into the paint and he just wasn't converting, I think, at the level that he's used to. And if they continue to let him get into the paint and get looks that he probably should make, eventually he's going to start making them. And that's where it could get problematic. But also, honestly, I just wanted to talk about this game as a whole was just really weird. And so at the same time, I feel like we have all these thoughts and feelings about it, but I feel like this game was really hard to read. Like at the end of the day, I don't think either team played amazing. It had a weird feel to it, like Edwards went out in that first half and the crowd was kind of dead, and like it felt like a regular season game. There was some weird stuff that happened here or there. I don't know, it didn't feel like a playoff basketball game.
I think it just felt like so predictable, and because the Warriors went off to such a bad start early on, like I don't know. I'd kind of lost hope halfway through the first quarter, and yeah, I definitely regained it when they hit a couple threes in the third and cut it to a 7-point game. But yeah, it was a weird game, and frankly, like we've seen in a few different series, the Warriors versus Rockets, Timberwolves versus the Lakers last series, that game twos are kind of weird. Like there's a lot of energy and attention to detail and focus put on these game ones, and then you're playing 48 hours later and lineups are completely different and game plans are completely different without Steph, that it's kind of hard to prepare for. It's also, the Anthony Edwards thing is, I'm very happy that he's healthy and, never root for injuries, but like that has to be the fourth or fifth time I've seen him like look like he has a season ending injury, and guy missed 4 minutes of the second quarter and ended up starting the second half. Like it's insane. Credit to being 23, I guess, but
Yeah, I mean, honestly, especially seeing the replay and seeing TJD just land on his ankle, I was like, did he break his ankle? And somehow he went out there and played his like regular minutes in the second half. I mean, we'll have to see, how he feels as the series progresses, but it looks like he's going to be fine. But also, I think that was honestly such a big thing for the Warriors. The fact that they won game one is honestly, they were able to treat this game kind of like a game one, in the sense of it was kind of a feel out game, because without Steph, they were trying to just figure out how they were going to play this going forward. Because in game one was different. They had Steph for some of it, and I think both teams were just kind of adjusting on the fly. So now that, Minnesota has had a little bit of time to prepare for the Warriors without Steph, and now the Warriors have seen kind of what they're going to do. I think, game three, as with every playoff series, is going to look a lot different. At the end of the day, they did get their split, and we'll see if Anthony Edwards wears down as the series progresses, given the fact that he's had that ankle hit a few times in this playoffs. Not that I'm rooting for it, or not that I'm expecting it really, with how good he looked in the second half tonight, but it is something at least worth keeping an eye on.
Definitely a thing to keep an eye on, but like if there's anyone I would bet on to battle out an injury or to miraculously heal from an injury, it's Anthony Edwards. I mean, the dude is young, he's hyper athletic, seems like he has like a type of grit and determination that you don't really see, I feel like, in these Gen Z basketball players. I don't even know if Gen Z is right. I never know the generation, so
that seems right. I also, honestly, I could do probably a whole other episode on this, but seeing him, at least mentality-wise, in comparison to like Jason Tatum, is night and day. We don't have to get into the whole Tatum thing, but it baffles me that he doesn't try to score more from inside the three-point line. But anyway.
Dude, the amount of Celtic fans I know living in New York that were texting me and talking to me last summer and were just calling Steve Kerr like, he's a terrible coach, he doesn't know what he's doing, this is the NBA Finals champion we're talking about. I'm like, do we see it now? Like, you wanted this guy to play with Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and LeBron James and be a spot-up shooter? Like, he had wide open threes in the end of the fourth quarter of that Knicks game and couldn't make them. And you're right, he doesn't take shots outside the three-point line. And when he does, like we saw that in 2022, like he hits a lot of missed layups around the rim. And yeah, but to digress a little bit on Tatum, that's for another day. I don't know if they necessarily have the room for error to just say this is a feel-out game. Like, I get what you're saying, and again, we can go back to the fact that they split too, and if we were having this conversation 48 hours ago, we'd be having a completely different conversation. But they're going to be underdogs in every game that Steph's not starting, and even when he does start, it's going to be a pick-em. And hamstring injuries are weird, dude. I don't know if you've ever had one, but like, it's not like a bruise or like when he had his pelvic injury and you just eventually heal. Like, you might heal, you might have a setback, you might pull it in the first quarter of the next game. Like they're unpredictable, and it's like not one of those things where you can be like, tough it out. Steph's also never had a hamstring injury in his entire career. He's logged 125 injuries, documented injuries in his NBA career, and he's never had a hamstring injury. And every Warrior fan is going to want him to push to play for game 5, but like, you can't. We saw Klay Thompson have a hamstring injury in 2019. He comes back, and granted that ACL was kind of a freak accident, Danny Green's hits him, but like, that shit happens. When you're hobbled on one part of your leg, the rest of the leg kind of overcompensates, and hoping that's not the case. But
yeah, I mean, and I think that's really what this all comes down to. Like, we could talk all day about whether or not they can win without Steph or how much they can do without Steph, but at the end of the day, the entire season rides on whether or not Steph can come back. Because even if, let's say, they do advance out of this series without Steph even playing the rest of the way, they're not beating Denver or OKC without Steph.
They're not beating Minnesota without Steph. I love the optimism. You think there's any way they can win 3 out of the next 5 without a healthy Steph Curry?
It's unlikely, but I truly have not been impressed with how Minnesota has played in these first 2 games.
And at the same time, we just lost by 20, 25 points. I hear what you're saying, but it's like the margin for error is slim when Steph is playing, and you take out I would argue the most important player for his individual team in the NBA. Like you can maybe say Shea, but there are few guys who are more impactful to an offense and to a scheme and to what a coach is trying to do in his game plan than Steph is to the Warriors.
Oh, no, 100%. And at the end of the day, they do need him back. And I think they probably do need him to win this series. But I think if Minnesota just continues to, I just don't get the vibe that they really want it that bad, And if they just keep playing like that, I just think that's a dangerous mentality for a team to have.
I could see that with a Julius Randle, but I have a hard time seeing Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, some of these, dogs really, really not want this game, especially as the series gets closer and later on.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, Ant especially, he just looked a little bit disjointed, and the team at times, even today, just looked a little off to me. And maybe it was just the weirdness of the game and some of the vibes that shifted when he went out for a little bit. But those first 2 games in Minnesota just haven't felt like that intense, or they haven't felt like, Minnesota's really coming at the Warriors. Like, they made some shots tonight, but they were wide open shots. Well, they had some hustle in their game for sure, but I don't know. There's something about these first 2 games that doesn't have me necessarily cowering from the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I mean, especially not Anthony Edwards. I think he made 1 3 in the 2 games he's played, and he's missed almost everything around the rim. Like, as healthy as he may be at 23, like he did definitely hurt that ankle, and it may labor as the series progresses. Are you worried at all about Draymond Green being 2 technical points away and 2 flagrant points away from a suspension?
I think that's something that only matters if they win the series, right? Like I think that's something we talk about after this series if they're in the conference finals. Like right now, it may not even matter, especially if Steph doesn't come back and they get eliminated. But it is something to cause for concern. It also honestly looked like he wanted no parts of this game and was trying to get himself thrown out, which that also didn't necessarily surprise me.
It's a terrible look, though, like with the younger guys that like Steph Curry has to like run across the court to pull him away from a ref that he's screaming at, calling him a MFer and telling him about how terrible a call is. And the fact that Steve Kerr has to like sub him out because he knows if Draymond continues to play, he's going to do another thing reckless. And
it was bad. I expect him to come out differently in game 3, but I mean, you can only expect so much from Draymond, and he's so unpredictable. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't see him getting up to the threshold for a suspension in this series. But granted, he's had some weird run-ins with Gobert in the past, and maybe that's something that the Timberwolves are talking about too, about trying to bait him. But I truly think that's a problem for the next round.
I think every team tries to bait him. I mean, there is really nothing you can say about him at this point. Like, no matter the counseling and personal work he does, or all the times he says he's a changed man, like he just cannot help himself to every once in a while make a boneheaded, slightly dirty play. And he's never going to get the benefit of the doubt. Like, you do this enough times and you are in refs' ears enough times. If it's a 50-50 call, and we saw that last series against the Rockets when he got a technical and I thought a very unwarranted one, and I even thought today was questionable, but like, it's Draymond Green. Do you think Mike Conley gets a technical if he makes that same foul today?
No, definitely not. And I do think he's earned his reputation for the most part at this point in his career. But it also, honestly, as a Warriors fan, sometimes can be so frustrating. I think people talk about how often Draymond talks to the refs. Like, there aren't other players in the league who do the same thing at a pretty solid rate that are definitely officiated differently. Obviously, again, he's earned his reputation. And you can cut me off here before I get too deep down the rabbit hole about LeBron James, but I'm pretty sure LeBron James could slap a referee in the face and not get a technical foul. And especially during those years where the Warriors and Cavs were going at it, it was so funny to see like Cavs fans crying about Draymond's behavior when LeBron James is the same way. He is, the golden goose, so he can do whatever he wants. But
Anthony Edwards last series, when he hurt his ankle originally, it was LeBron diving on his ankle. And I'm not saying it was an inherently dirty play, but like, that's the type of thing where if Draymond does that, that's all over your Twitter timeline. And every non-Warrior fan is calling him the dirtiest player in the NBA. And I don't know, man. I love Draymond and like everything he's done for the Warriors, and like he totally straddles the line, but he goes over it far too often. And he has 5 techs and 2 flagrants in 9 games. If this works out the way we hope it does, the Warriors are looking at anywhere between 8 to 15 games, and that's the bull case, but that's a lot of games to play being on your best behavior, and for a guy that we know has a hard time doing that.
He's got himself way too close to the line this early in the playoffs for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
There's nothing we can do.
There's nothing we can do, and you need him to ride the line. Like tonight, I think the tech was not great, but then his behavior afterwards also not great, right? But it's a delicate balance of he does need to ride that line to do the things he does at his size, and I understand that. I think I've always probably been one of the bigger Draymond Green apologists among Warriors fans and the people that I know. But it could be a problem. But, honestly, if that's a problem that we're discussing in a week or two, I'm okay with that because that means the Warriors are moving on.
Let's hope it's not him getting a tech in game 3 and a tech in game 4 and Steph comes back for game 5 without his running mate. But I'm being overly pessimistic. Like I said, if this was 2 nights ago, I'd be feeling a completely different way. So to close off, I want to just ask you one last question. What's one thing you want to see looking at this past game where we got blown out? What do you want to see change with this team heading into game 3?
I want them to play smarter, both ends of the floor. If you can try to limit your mistakes, they're going to be in every game with this team. And if you're in a game, Jimmy can win you a game or two, And like that was the most frustrating thing about tonight, right? Is they got so close and then they just got careless with the ball. And that's the thing that the Warriors do. But they didn't do that in game 1. They played smart on the defensive end. If they can use their heads a little bit, these next 2 games would be really interesting.
Completely agree. I think playing smart on defense, not fouling, not turning over the ball 4 times a quarter. Completely agree there. I think for me, the biggest thing is going to be how these role players respond. Being in the home environment should certainly help things, but Post, Podz, Moody have all been zeros pretty much. And honestly, I think Post might be out of the rotation. I think we saw a lot of really good TJD minutes tonight, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting the nod, whether it's starting or being the first big off the bench. If we can just get like 20 points out of those 3 guys, maybe 18 points, like that's a completely different game. But it may be a lot to ask for a young group that has struggled the last couple nights.
We saw Podz have that great game 4 against the Rockets at home. I had the good fortune of being at that game. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Honestly, it is hard to be optimistic with Steph out, but I don't know. Like, it's hard for me to ever feel like these guys are out of a game, even though, a lot of times they are. We've just seen this team do incredible things, and I know it looks a lot different than it does now, but the DNA is still there, and I want them to try to show that DNA when they come back home.
I think they really need to split at least the next 2, and if Steph's still not able to come back, they could go down 3-2 and have him back at home for 6 and 7, but that's kind of asking a lot for a guy coming off a hamstring injury to probably have to play 35 minutes a game and to close out game 6 and 7. But I feel like I've been too pessimistic this episode, so I apologize to the listeners. I'm still, I'm not missing a minute. I'm not missing a dribble the next hopefully 5 games, but I got my concerns, and Satchel is a lot more optimistic than I am, and I hope you're right, man. Next week, maybe we can have another convo and we're talking on a lot more positive terms. Hopefully the Dubs have at least taken 1 back home. Maybe we'll do a little game 5 preview with maybe Steph's return. Maybe.
We'll see. I truly think they're targeting game 6. And hey, you just got to win one of these next 2 to get to a game 6. And I, the ultimate optimist, think they could win both. I know that's crazy, but we'll check back in next week and see how I did.
How about you stand on it? Will they win the next 2 games?
Fuck it, yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, you heard it here first. The Dubs are probably going to be 5-6 point underdogs in the next 2 nights, but Satchel Foster has them winning both at home, going up 3-1, heading back to Minnesota for game 5 on Wednesday night. We'll talk soon, Satchel. Take care, man.
All right, man.
Now, if you made it to the end of the episode, I want to say thank you. If you don't mind subscribing and maybe even dropping a like, you'll become my new best friend. I produce these Bay Area sports podcasts twice a week, and I'm looking to grow my audience as much as I can. You can find the audio version of the podcast on Spotify or Apple Pods at the Bay Area Beat, and on YouTube at Bay Area Beat. You can also find short clips on all socials under the same name. Thanks again for listening. Catch you all next week.